Welcome back to the podcast. Took a little break for some travel. Then some people got sick. So we're back after 3 weeks off. And this is a podcast. Today we're going to talk about sports movies. And the reason I think this is a great podcast topic, and Dave brought this up, we're kind of going over topics. These sports movies, you know, that we grew up watching, I think had a real influence on both of us. And I think is a reason too, in part how CrossFit and these explosion of gyms actually happened, because where a lot of this came from, and you know, I could go on a rant about this, but guys our age are who started these CrossFit gyms. We grew up in the 80s and 90s watching a lot of these movies. And it's when these sports movies, things like Rocky and all these motivational like training montages came out, and it locked in little kids into watching this and like seeing people like change their bodies and do this stuff. And obviously for us, it just kind of burnt something into our heads where, you know, fast forward 30 years later and we're kind of doing it for a living.
Yeah, I think, you know, some are serious, some are funny, and a little bit in between. And it's just a good template to like have a story and drama and comedy. And I feel like, you know, some of these, you know, teams or players in these movies, like if you've ever been on a locker room or on a team, like you've had those situations too.
Oh yeah.
Where just all this stuff happens. And, you know, when you're a young kid and you're watching some of these movies, then you kind of grow up and you get in those situations and you're like, yeah, this is kind of what it's like sometimes. And it's funny. Like they can be inspiring and they could just be, you know, really funny to kind of,
you identify with these characters, you know, I mean, I can even think of one I have thrown in here. I kind of have it in like this miscellaneous category, and it might be in here. It's Caddyshack. So I grew up working at country clubs. So I worked at 3 different country clubs and then one in particular in the Gulf. And Caddyshack and how all of like the golf kids and maintenance people and how we were and the guys who worked at, you know, it was like that movie was so awesome. Like going back and watching it, it probably happened, you know, they probably made the movie 20 years before I worked there, but it was still pretty dang relevant. And it was like a comedic version of exactly our lives for 4 years. Mm-hmm. It was awesome. So
it's pretty accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. It was great. We would just laugh our butts off about, you know, we'd watch that movie, me and all the guys who worked there. And it was like, this is what we do every day. So
it's funny, like kind of, the original Caddyshack obviously was very famous and well known. The one that I actually knew Caddyshack 2 better than the first one. I mean, that was.
Did you have like a VHS of it or something?
Yes,
okay.
VHS
so if you have
it was
like
on a dub
like
tape,
that, yeah.
and like that's the one I became very familiar with.
Yep.
And I think that one was on only like PG, maybe PG-13, and the first one was R-rated, and it was made, you know, probably around the time I was born or a little bit before. Yep. So my exposure to Caddyshack was the second one for years. And I love that one. It had different characters in it.
Okay.
Some, like,
I don't think I've even seen that
wasn't
one.
in it and stuff like that. But like Randy Quaid was. It's worth a watch. It's fun.
Okay.
Like it's pretty good, but it's definitely a different movie. But man, it's really good.
I got to check that. I don't think I've seen that one. So okay.
You want to go by sports category?
We can do that. Yeah. We can definitely do that. So, you know, me and you grew up with a little bit different sporting backgrounds. Like I probably have more baseball ones listed here than anything. I really like baseball movies. You probably like gravitated a little more towards like football movies.
I didn't care movies wise. I've watched them all.
I kind of did too. Actually, it looks pretty. I have like well distributed like boxing, baseball, like I kind of have like Karate Kid and Vision Quest like, and the boxing ones.
If you open
know?
this up to too much like fighting and martial arts, now we're going down like blood sport and like Enter the Dragon. Like we were going very far with this.
Oh,
like, you could stretch the limits of sport.
I kind of have it in sports because Karate Kid is like a sport kind of thing.
I would say, like in the arena of like a fixed match, like you could put blood sport and kickboxers in there. Like it is a martial arts.
Yep.
Yeah.
And baseball, basketball, football, and then I have like miscellaneous ones where you've got like.
What are some of your favorite baseball ones? We'll start there.
Baseball. So Major League, we were talking about that, is probably the one I've watched the most and is one of the best comedies ever. And they've got great powerhouse like actors in it, got like young, like Wesley Snipes and Tom Berenger and
Charlie Sheen. I mean, there's so many lines in that movie. It's infinitely quotable. I mean, it's so good.
For younger folks too, who, haven't seen that. That's a good one. And I think there's like parallels now. People have like, they'll use that movie for teams that are like trying to tank or move their team, because the premise of the movie is the owner wants to move. She got divorced and got the team in a divorce, and she wants to move the team down to Florida. It's the Cleveland Indians, and the
Guardians.
Yeah. So they're trying to, she tried to field like the worst team together and get them, moved down to Florida. And then they kind of like use that as motivation. And it's a hilarious movie, but they'll use that. Like I've seen it used in memes, like looks like the, whatever team is trying to do a major league here and, field like the worst ragtag team ever. Bull Durham's a good one. I know you said you hadn't quite seen that all the way through. The Natural and Field of Dreams are really, really good, like drama, more serious baseball movies that are good. That ones that'll like make you cry when you watch them. Field of Dreams is
pretty epic. It's a good movie, and it holds up over time so well. Yeah,
that's a great one. They've actually started playing a Major League Baseball game each year at that field now.
My friend in college, Mike, he grew up in Harrisburg, and his dad, when he was I think it was in high school or in college, like his dad had moved out and bought a farm in the country and literally made a field.
Yeah.
Like on this land, and he would have night games and lights. He was kind of simulating kind of this Field of Dreams thing. And because he grew up playing baseball, Mike played baseball in high school and stuff. So they had leagues play out there and stuff like that. Cool. He kind of made some money from it, but it was really more of a
It was kind of inspired by that movie.
It was a passion project, right? You know what I mean? So it was, and I went out there one summer and visited him and stayed there for a bit. His wedding was actually there years ago.
That's really
after
cool.
college. So it was neat. It was a cool farmhouse. It was kind of like that setup. It was kind of inspired from Field of Dreams. It was very cool. They had old time uniforms. So like when you played on the field, like they had uniforms for you.
That's neat. That's really neat.
If he has a website for it or something, I'll show it to you at some point. It's really neat.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah,
that's super cool. Yeah, as kids, we actually mowed a field out in my cousin's yard with got tractors out and did it like that movie, and then played with some kids in the neighborhood. It was really fun. A
League of Their Own.
A League of Their Own is a really good movie. I watched that probably more than any of the other movies on here because it was on a loop on HBO.
It was some of these movies back in the day on cable were constantly on. When you had no choice to watch anything, you watched what was on TV. You're like, all right, it's Major League again, or it's A League of Their Own. Some of them, like Major League, where they're R-rated, there's just a lot of swearing. Sometimes on TV, like if it's not on HBO, they're just edited so much it's not as good.
It's not as good.
The ones like Major League or Field of Dreams or A League of Their Own, like they're fit for TV.
They're watchable on TV.
Yeah, they held up really well. Yeah. I mean, like The Sandlot is probably A League of Their Own. The Sandlot and Field of Dreams and Major League are the four major baseball movies.
I've got those in.
The Sandlot is awesome. I feel like I always watch, even every couple of years, I'll still watch that.
So that's one where my son is now going to he's going to really dig that. He likes baseball and plays. One that I loved. Have you seen the original Bad News Bears? With Walter Matthau and Tatum O'Neal.
It's been some years, but yeah.
So that movie's that's a sleeper for me because so that movie, again, that one probably came out maybe 15 years before I was about that age, late 70s.
78 or something.
Yeah.
Late 70s it came out.
And when I was that age, when that movie, with kind of compared to those kids, I had a whole team of kids that looked like that team, like long hair. And it was, again, very similar team. Like kids kind of came from not the best upbringing, wild bunch of kids. you know, a few years later, I still played with some of those kids. We'd be like 13 and their girlfriends would be like smoking in the bleachers. Like
Some of the things might be problematic about that movie these days.
Oh yeah.
For its time, it's great.
He gives them all like beers at the end of the game, at their last game. Yeah. But I had a team that was so similar to that, and it felt so much like that movie. So I would go back years later and watch it because it made me feel like I was, 10 or 11 years old playing baseball on that hot field, and it looked just like that. So that one, and then one that's a recent one, and this will be like I think the last baseball movie is Moneyball with Brad Pitt. Mm-hmm. And it might be one of his best roles that he's ever been in. And where he just gets into the kind of the analytics of, they're always looking at baseball players a certain way. And he was able to, field an incredible team with like a minimal budget.
A Michael Lewis book about like how teams were, it's based on a true story of how they're, franchises are basically organizing teams now based on because baseball is all about statistics and little things like that. So it's really about not having a superstar franchise player, but like positionally and just like the guy that was Jonah Hill's character. Like what
he was like a college, fresh out of college.
He was like an accountant or so. He was just more of a numbers guy and like came up with this idea and Brad Pitt, believed him. So yeah,
like he used this like WAR or OPS stat that he kind of figured out, like, getting guys on base, like they didn't have to like have the look or the speed. It was just like, are these guys effective in this way, and like get the, field a team together, because in baseball, the disparity in what the teams can spend is insane. Like, a small market team like the Reds, you've got a guy like Ohtani who plays for the Dodgers, who his salary is almost like the whole team salary for the one Reds.
Just signed that
just
contract.
One player.
Yeah, he just signed that. Yeah.
So that's where it's like these like smaller teams have to really hustle and like be smart and strategic with, how they're gonna be a competitive team. So from a business standpoint too, like as I was older, that movie came out in more recent years, especially it kind of came out. I saw it in the theaters once I owned the gym, and it was almost from a business standpoint, it was kind of like a cool movie too.
Moneyball my gym. my CrossFit team.
Yeah, exactly.
You're kind of looking at that. Yeah. Yeah. Kind of,
let's get into, how about football movies? I'll let you kind of lead the charge on that. Like your favorite football movies.
I think comedy wise, I feel like I'm going to leave out some, but you've got Varsity Blues. It's kind of serious and funny, memorable. It kind of came out of time we were in high school. Like memorable movie.
That was a huge movie for like 16-year-old kids in high school.
The Program. Are you kidding me? The Program. Oh, yeah. That is amazing.
That's a movie I watched on a loop on HBO too.
That's a great.
I watched that movie 50 times growing up.
Yeah, you have to watch that unedited. You've got like Little Giants. That was always fun when I was younger.
I've got that on my list here. Yeah.
Friday Night Lights, and what was the other one we say? Remember the Titans of Friday Night Lights came out around the same time. Yep. Both more serious movies, great casts, like really well done, critically acclaimed movies. Those are really good. Kind of a sleeper one that I liked. I think it was like late 80s, early 90s. Remember Necessary Roughness?
Yes.
It was like Scott Bakula.
Is Sinbad
was in it. Yep. Kathy Ireland was in it. It's kind of
she's
like
the kicker.
She's the kicker. It was like there was like a huge Hawaiian like guy that was like the center.
Again, a ragtag crew. Yeah. They're
underdog story.
They're college kids. Yeah. Scott Bakula is about 38.
Yes, because I think he had some eligibility, and he's like he's almost 40 at this point. They pull him out of retirement. He plays. That movie's really funny.
It's a funny movie.
Rob Schneider's in it. He's like the announcer in the booth. That's a pretty good movie. That one held up pretty good. I've watched it over the years, but that was always a funny one for me. There's a good cast in that. There's some funny parts.
Any Given Sunday is more of a modern, high budget football movie about the NFL.
Yeah. That's a good
Jamie
movie.
Foxx is in that.
Yeah.
Jerry Maguire. That's a football movie.
That is technically a football movie. Yep. Yeah.
It's about sport. It's the first like sports agent movie. Mm-hmm. Then I think from that movie came like the show Ballers with The Rock and things like that, probably inspired by that movie. But that was a good one that I didn't remember. I wrote that like last second. I was like, oh, I think that's a football movie.
You talking about The Waterboy? Adam Sandler has a good source with The Waterboy.
Yep. I saw that in the theaters.
Yeah, that's a funny movie. That one's good.
So how about basketball movies? Mm-hmm. So White Men Can't Jump is probably the best basketball movie ever. Rosie Perez in that. That's her big role right there. Yeah. But that's just a good movie, even not a sports movie. It's just about people who are struggling, you know, and trying to figure out a way to make it. They did a remake that my son loves basketball, and it wasn't a terrible movie. It was not even in the stratosphere of that original one. A movie that is a documentary that I would put in here, and it's actually on some of these lists that I've seen is the number one movie is Hoop Dreams. Have you seen that before?
Yeah, it's been a while, but it was a documentary about those two kids growing up in Chicago. Yeah.
It takes like a day to watch. I mean, it's long.
Yeah, I think it's like 3 hours.
It goes from when they're like 13 through college, and it's really interesting because you think it's totally going one way, and then it just like switches at the end. Like one kid all of a sudden kind of makes it it just did not look like his life was going the right direction. And that's probably the best sports documentary I've ever seen.
It's about life and kind of poverty and racism and like struggling. And, you know, from kind of some people were saying, and I haven't watched it probably since I was a teenager, early 20s. Like, I think at the time you identify with the kids, and then they're like, if you watch it as an adult, you kind of see it from the parents' perspective.
That's what I've heard. Yeah, I was just reading
about the sacrifices they make and just like trying to raise a family and kids and trying to provide and stuff. So it'd be
when
interesting.
They're broke too.
Yeah. You know? It'd be interesting to kind of go back and watch that from a different perspective again. Hoosiers is on there. That's Gene Hackman. It was one I actually I never saw. I missed the window when I was a kid. I never saw it.
It's good. Dennis Hopper, I believe, is like an alcoholic dad and like an assistant coach who they kind of keep bringing in. And it's been a while since I've seen it, but it is a good one to go back and watch because I remember just the feeling when I was watching it. It was like, you know, it's about a big game and it's super exciting. It's a really cool movie. That one's actually got number one on the AP poll. One basketball movie that is people don't remember that you should go back and watch is Blue Chips with
Shaq and Nick Nolte.
Yeah.
I saw that in theaters.
Yep.
Joe Moore Cinema in Victor, New York. I saw that. Yeah. 94.
So
it's a great movie.
So of any movie, that one had like an actual impact on the NBA because Penny Hardaway was a college student and Shaq was he had just graduated and he had just started playing for the Magic, and they were just playing in the gym, you know, throughout that movie. And Penny Hardaway was supposed to be drafted maybe in the second round or late in the first round. And he basically like held up his franchise and demanded that they get Penny Hardaway like drafted and like earlier than he had been anticipated. And they got him, and, you know, him and Shaq went to a finals and like, you know, ended up being like a really cool duo. So that is that's a good movie that actually, if you watch it now with all the, you know, all the college money and stuff going around, it kind of shows how we got to where we are now with that because, you know, they're buying the guys' houses and giving
what was always going on, but we kind of like just tried to hide. And now it's like they've just said, all right, we know this is going on. We're just going to make it, you know, legal through the NCAA. Yeah.
It's a well-made and well-acted movie. That's a great movie.
Few more basketball ones that I know pretty well. Love and Basketball.
Yep.
Kind of a romantic, kind of more serious movie. That's a really good movie. Another more of a street one, Above the Rim.
Oh yeah.
Dude, Above the Rim with Tupac.
Tupac's in it.
Bernie Mac. I mean, that is a great movie. I mean, it's more of a drama movie, but that's a good movie. Above the Rim is really good.
He Got Game with Denzel Washington and Ray Allen is a good one as well.
I think it was a Spike Lee movie. Yeah.
Yep.
I don't remember that one as well. I mean, that was when they did the remake of that song came out for the movie. It was like a Public Enemy song.
Yeah. That's a good one. boxing, fighting, combative sport movies. We're not going to get into, because me and you, we could do a whole podcast on probably martial arts movies too.
Entire 80s action genre, yeah.
So obviously, you know, we probably wouldn't even be doing this podcast without, you know, the whole Rocky series of movies. Mm-hmm. So that series of movies inspired just working out and training in general to a degree that I don't think any other film ever has. You know, people saw him out running and doing these things. And apparently, you know, I've read about it after that, jogging and things like that, like went up, people going to the gym. Gyms started popping up at a rate that they hadn't before because of these Rocky movies. And then, you know, for me as a kid, Rocky IV was probably the one I watched the most.
Yeah.
Because it was on TV. It was the most recent one, you know, when we were growing up that had been made.
I think it came out in 89.
Yeah, a little later into the 80s, at least into the mid 80s, where, you know, it was still a newer movie when we were kids. And the training montages in that movie hold up to this day, like very well, and is probably what got me into like wanting to work out in a lot of ways, because those are burnt into my head of like people training really hard. You know, Dolph Lundgren and Sylvester Stallone at his absolute peak.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean,
like,
it's the first one obviously was an amazing movie. It was kind of, there was more outside the ring, you know, drama going on. The first one, it was a well-made movie and it won many awards. But by that, you know, usually in franchises as the movies go on, they kind of go downhill a little bit sometimes, at least in that era. You know, it's look at anything like, Police Academy. So they're just going down. Like the first Police Academy, great movie. By 7 or 8, it's like no one's even around anymore.
Yeah.
So it was really cool to see most of those Rocky movies hold up. And the fourth one is just amazing. It's really good.
Yeah.
It's now got probably a bigger budget. You've got great actors in it. They're all just like ripped to the gills. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's great. And then the fifth one was kind of weird, but whatever.
Yeah.
And then you got the spinoffs with Creed and stuff. So yeah, those are definitely up there.
The Creed ones are great. Like they remade basically the story for, you know, kind of a new generation of kids, and they're done well and they hold up, and they didn't bastardize the Rocky movies with those. That first Creed movie, you know, I remember seeing that and I was like, this is like some of the best acting I think Stallone's ever done. Mm-hmm. You know, I think he got nominated for, you know, best supporting actor for, you know, a bunch of different awards for that.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Some other good boxing movies. Raging Bull is a good one about a real boxer named Jake LaMotta. And it's kind of a good one about, you know, sort of like toxic masculinity of like that era and time. And it's a well done movie. The Fighter.
Is it Scorsese?
It is. Yeah. It is a Scorsese movie.
Yeah.
And that's up at the top of like a lot of sports movie like lists.
One of De Niro's first biggest roles too. I mean, that came out like way before. I've only seen parts of the movie.
Yeah.
I've seen Taxi Driver. That's a great movie. I have not seen Raging Bull. The only parts of it.
It's a good. Joe Pesci's his brother in it, so he's in it too, and so that's kind of where they, you know, they're in a lot of movies together, you know, throughout the '80s and stuff. But they're both phenomenal in it. He's his brother in the movie, and they have a real tumultuous relationship.
A lot of fighting movies based on brother relationships.
Yeah,
I've got a few that I'll bring up too. But
the Fighter with Mark Wahlberg and Christian Bale, based on Mickey Ward, is a really good modern take kind of on Raging Bull. I would say, you know, the Mickey Ward character is a lot less villainous than the Jake LaMotta. He's a good dude. And then his brother is like, Christian Bale's like a drug addict, kind of in and out, and was his trainer and partner. And, you know, they're both still alive now. And, that's a well-made modern one.
You ever seen Warrior with Tom Hardy
Yes.
and Joel Edgerton.
That's a good one.
That was a sleeper one.
That's a very good one.
A few of us, we were at my buddy Matt's house years ago as his apartment, and a bunch of us were hanging out. And I don't know if he had seen it and recommended it and pulled it up, but there was like 8 or 10 of us that sat around and watched it. I was not expecting like this movie that would be this good. I mean, it is. It's only from 2011. It's a little older, but I mean, that is a fantastic movie.
Yeah. Nick Nolte again.
Yeah. I think that was MMA.
It was.
It wasn't necessarily boxing.
Yeah, it was an MMA movie.
Oh, God. I highly recommend that movie.
Yeah.
It's not just about fighting. It's kind of family dynamics and being brothers. And it's really, really good.
Yeah.
That one's actually up there in a lot of lists, too, to be honest.
It is. Yeah. That's a really good recent movie. The Karate Kid is a huge one, especially for guys around our age. Everyone saw that movie a lot. And it's a lot about, being, a new kid in town, trying to make your way, getting bullied, being the poor kid, getting bullied by the rich kids. Another just big underdog story.
A lot of sports movies everything is always seems to be an underdog.
Yeah.
Thing. I think that's what makes that kind of the sports kind of genre as a vehicle for a story really good, because you can always frame someone literally coming from behind, or the odds are against him, coming out on top or trying to struggle to do that. Yeah.
I think, we were pretty young when that movie was made, but particularly, we're watching it, when we're in first grade and things like that. And every kid who watched it now thought they knew karate by the end of that movie. I remember that very well. Being little kids crane kicking each other.
Yeah, exactly.
On the playground and things like that.
Every dude in your own age has crane kicked someone or faked it sometime in their life. I guarantee you.
Absolutely. Rudy was, I forgot to talk about that in football. I
knew I was going to miss it on this one. Yeah.
That's a phenomenal football movie. And again, that's probably one of the best, if not the best, underdog,
based
sports
on a true
movies,
story too. Based on a true story.
This guy, I'll tell you what they did do. When I was a kid, I just, Notre Dame is obviously a super big powerhouse of a football school, but man, they made playing for Notre Dame seem like nothing in the world compared to that. When you watch that as a kid, they really made that seem special. They did a great job in that movie of doing that. The Vision Quest is, if you haven't seen that, have you seen that movie before?
Only parts of it. I missed the boat on that one.
That one is, so it's not as popular of a movie. Anyone who's a wrestler has seen that movie, but it's very much like a Rocky or a Karate Kid, but a high school wrestling version of it. But it's a very gritty, realistic movie too. And it's who's the dude from Full Metal Jacket? Matthew Modine.
He's the wrestler. Right?
He's the wrestler in that movie. He's phenomenal in that movie. I mean, he looks like he really, I don't know if he wrestled in high school, but he looks like he really got himself in that mode. He looks good. And then he has to wrestle this guy who looks would be the most terrifying high school wrestler ever, who I think was actually. Mm-hmm. And he has 4 lines in the movie, and he just he's carrying logs up bleachers in high school. It's a great 80s Karate Kid style movie. It might be better than all those movies. So that's one, if you're sitting on the couch and what's great about all these movies we're talking about now, when we were growing up, you would have to maybe go to a video store and search these out. It's so cool. So if you hear one of these, you can just go to any streaming service.
Instantly find it. Most of these you can instantly find right now. But yeah, you literally had to go on a Vision Quest to find some of these movies before.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My son, it's funny. He's I torture him with all these 80s movies and things like that. Now I'm you're sitting down and you're watching this with your sister right now. He's this again. He wants to watch YouTube shorts and stuff. So
I have to sit down and watch something that's longer than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I know it's good. It's probably good for all of us.
I know. That is the thing, with these movies, it's having the patience to sit through a 2-hour movie now.
And they were paced differently then. I mean, and they still hold up well, but like, they're just not as flashy, or it was like,
absolutely
the pace is slower, but you just got to sit with it and enjoy the story. Yeah.
I think there's a story to all of these movies, and we can learn from them. And I think, if you want to, get inspired, if you're feeling bummed out and you want to kind of feel like you want to get a little fire lit under your ass, like,
what Chelsea watches like at least once a year? Miracle, the hockey movie.
Oh yeah.
Like that movie. It's super inspiring. Like all these, I mean, sometimes they can be cheesy, but like, yeah, I think sometimes they're just feel good stories. And like I said, sports is like kind of a framing thing for, inspiring, like comeback stories, and underdog stories are cool. And sorry, cut you off.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's going to make you feel good, at the end of these movies. Go back and watch some of these. If you guys, especially in the winter, now a lot of people aren't getting out as much, like turn on one of these good movies instead of, flipping through your Netflix show or whatever. Put one of those on hold. And, if you heard one of these movies that you hadn't seen, when I pulled up some of these lists, I haven't seen some of these movies. Have you seen Chariots of Fire?
The old one.
It's a running movie.
Yeah, everyone knows that song, but I've never seen it.
I think it won like Best Picture. Like it was like no one knows about that movie now. I think it was like won the Academy Award for like Best Cinematography or movie in like 1981. Never seen it. So I'm seeing a lot of these movies on here that I'm like, I need to go back and watch this. And it's going to probably light a fire under your ass and get you wanting to come into this gym and train and do something.
Not only with movies, but like with book stuff too. What I find myself doing now is if especially one that's not going to pop up probably on a streaming service you'll randomly come across, even if it's a little bit older, is like, I literally make a list and write down. If there's like some classic ones that I haven't seen or I want to rewatch, it's like, I have a whiteboard in my house. Like I'll just to remind myself, because there's kind of so many good things that you want to see or like catch up on, or, ones like Chariots of Fire that you've never seen, or Raging Bull. Like I'm going to forget about these if I don't think about it, just because there's so much crap out there these days to watch. And like, I'll just write them down and I'll just hopefully get to them at some point. But just kind of making a list like that, just to kind of go back and see some of these ones that were, well-known and remembered for a reason.
Yeah. No, it's a big one that was inspiring to me with CrossFit too. Did you see Every Second Counts? That Savan documentary from the 2008 games?
It's been some time, but yeah.
So I watched that. It's a big reason that like it locked me into CrossFit. So myself, Graham, Ralph, and a guy named Don who worked out at Ralph's gym before Graham went out to the 2009 games. Like the games was kind of a new thing. So it was a documentary that had just been completed on the games the year before. And it followed Josh Everett, OPT, who had won the games the year before, John Wellborn, who was an NFL football player who was going to participate in the games. He was like still playing in the NFL, I think. And Dutch Lowry, who was just another competitor. And it followed all four of these guys in their training and kind of their lives leading up to it. And I remember I had like a foot into CrossFit. Like I was starting to I was doing the workouts and had been for maybe 2 years, but I was still like doing some amateur boxing matches. And then I would like just start lifting or doing like speed training, and I wasn't all in. And I remember watching that documentary, and we watched it in his basement on a huge, he had like a movie theater in his basement. He had a really cool place. So we watched that, I think a day or two later. So Don and me and his wife went out to the games and watched Graham. And so then we watched it was in Aromas again. And I got to meet all the guys who I had seen in that movie. I got like pictures with them and stuff, like a kid, They're all like my age, but
yeah, still whatever.
Yeah,
Man.
I went out and like it was so cool because they were like celebrities to me now, and they don't, they're like in their second year of competing in CrossFit. It's not like this sport had been around, but I was just blown away, and I got to watch these guys compete in person, and then after that, I was all in. I was just like, this is like I got to see it and all like see this whole like community and crowd, and I'm like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. So a movie can really inspire and move your life in a different direction. And that movie really did that for me.
I think there's tons of aspects, especially like some of the, I never took martial arts as a kid, but like, just watching some of the movies, like some Van Damme movies, like Kickboxer and Bloodsport, or just things like that, where you just, there's just like these kind of goofy, like training scenes, stuff like that. Like as you're growing up and developing and you're getting an interest in like fitness and stuff, and you're seeing so like it does like kind of it trickles over and like, well, I want to look strong like that. And you just
absolutely
start, you just start like looking in the mirror when you're 12 and you're like, I need to start working out and doing stuff. Like, so it in a good way, like it has a positive influence, and I think it can really inspire people to do some cool things and make some changes in their lives, especially at an impressionable age.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, I think that's a good place to leave it off. We'll be back next week. We're going to be bringing on some guests the next few weeks, so stay tuned. See you guys next time.